constituency. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm from Abia State. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to lend my voice to what the leader of the House has just said. To the extent, Mr. Speaker, sir, that there's a global trend that moves away from pro-creditor insolvency, pro-creditor bankruptcy laws, to pro-debtor bankruptcy laws. And Mr. Speaker, the reason is very clear, that in the last couple of years, the world has seen a lot of economic upheavals that has seen hitherto strong companies going bankrupt, that have seen companies have more liability than have more assets. And so, of course, if you look at Asia, and we all speak about the Asian tigers, they were the first people who actually started this global revolution about looking at protecting the whole, protecting the economy of their countries by not vilifying, as it were, the people who were debtors. Mr. Speaker, after all the other countries went through, the Philippines was the last to go through because at the time the Philippines had a stronger base and of course their businesses were smaller businesses and they were doing quite well. But then when the economic wave hit them, they now had to change the thought process. Mr. Speaker, sir, everywhere from the Philippines to South Africa to all emerging developed, to the United States, to all developing emerging markets, Mr. Speaker, that is the trend. Now Nigeria finds herself in a recession. What that means, Mr. Speaker, is that so many of our businesses, unfortunately, may go belly up. We need to move away from bankruptcy to the extent that these countries that are bankrupt or insolvent are just taking up and taking over to creating a platform, and this is what this bill seeks to do, to create a legal framework that makes the resolution of these issues fair, transparent, and gives a platform wherein the companies that are insolvent can actually find their way back to solvency over a short-term, long-term, or medium-term. Mr. Speaker, a lot of people in the economic world have hailed this amendment and said that it is about time that Nigeria reenacted a law that speaks to protection of the people. This law furthermore goes, of course, hitherto it was just the courts that would adjudicate on how these matters be settled. But this law also creates an environment. It also very, very specifically speaks to trustees. It speaks to the way in which the assets will be received or recovered by these trustees. It speaks very granularly even to agriculture. So this is a bill for today. It is a bill for this time and period in Nigeria. Because other countries, for instance, the South African model says that after 10 years, if the country is still, if the company is still insolvent, after 10 years, it becomes automatically reactivated. In this case, it speaks to 1 year. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, the intendment, of course, is that we move away from collapsing our companies that may find themselves in tricky situations and killing them completely to helping them stay afloat until a time where we probably come out of this recession. Mr. Speaker, the executive arm of government, the legislative arm of government, all arms of government are working assiduously to ensure that we get out of this recession. But then we do not want the countries that have gone down with this recession to remain down. And that is why, at this point in time, this bill is very necessary. Mr. Speaker, another issue is foreign direct investment. One of Nigeria's foreign policies is foreign direct investment. To that end, Mr. Speaker, we're going around the world seeking that people come and invest in Nigeria. The IMF just developed a paper on global insolvency. Now, that paper on global insolvency speaks to what different countries will do in such a way that we all have laws, even though they would have the local content, but we all have laws that are at par with the global laws on insolvency. And so, Mr. Speaker, sir, that is what this bill also seeks to do, to bring us up to par, because we will be expecting companies from other countries to invest in our country and so on and so forth. We cannot drive or we cannot dictate what will happen to these companies, but we can at least have the laws that protect them and continue to support them in coming to invest in our country. And as the leader said, when we get to the stage, we will look at the concerns. I mean, like he said, some people have spoken about the concern about how it clashes with the AMCON law. Is it in conformity with the AMCON law? Does it create duplication with the AMCON law? It creates the office of a receiver, for instance. How does that take away from the functions of AMCON? But I think that when we get to the committee of the whole, these are the little fine lines that we must look at. But to all intents and purposes, this is where the rest of the world has moved to debtor, more pro-debtor insolvency laws. And so I'll urge my colleagues to let us pass this law. And then when we get to that point, then we can look at the issues, to concur with the Senate, we can look at the issues and probably raise those issues at the committee stage. Thank you.
Honorable Simon Arabo.